Glory days are here to stay, the 80s horror show. Take a stroll down memory's lane, it's time to start the show. The gory days, the gory days, the gory days, the gory days.
Oh, what a great time of year it is, everybody. Welcome to the Gory Days. It's been a while, but we're back, and we've got a whole lot of new changes coming down the pike. And before we get into any of that, this is the Gory Days, and we might have to change our theme song and our tagline, because this is the show where we take a stroll down memory lane to remember our favorite horror movies from the 1980s and early 1990s. But today's movie is the first in a long line, hopefully, of new changes here on the podcast. We are branching away from the 80s and 90s. Primarily, we're still going to dip in occasionally every now and then into some good classic gems, but today we're going to be talking about a much more recent movie. Recent in that it came out about 16 years ago, but certainly more recent than anything else. But I'm not going to spoil that. I have a very exciting guest here today. It's not every day that we get an actor on the podcast, somebody in the industry who ideally is going to tell us everything that's going on. I had a chance to watch her demo reel, very impressive stuff. Without further ado, the great Ali Weinstein.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you again so much for agreeing to be on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk about this movie today. But first, I want to talk about you. Who's Ali Weinstein? Where did you come from?
Who is Ali Weinstein? Where did I come from? I was born in New York City. So my parents had spent a long time there before I existed. And then we relocated to the suburbs of Boston, a very exciting place. And then I went back to New York for college, stayed there a bit after graduating, and then I moved to LA about 6 months ago.
6 months ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So were you doing acting during all of that, or are you a multi-hyphenate?
I am a multi-hyphenate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I primarily studied acting for most of my life, and weirdly enough, my high school had a film program, and I went to a public high school. It was a very random thing to have.
Cool.
And I started acting when I was really young. I did the whole community musical theater, etc.
What was the first thing you did? Do you remember?
Ooh, well, the first time I was ever on stage, so my dad is a stand-up comedian. And
really?
So, yeah.
Does he tour and stuff?
He did when I was younger. Now he more so does writing for other comedians or politicians, and
Anybody
he
we'd
writes
know?
screenplays. I'm totally blanking on his name. He often writes a lot of jokes for the guy who came second on America's Got Talent a few years ago. I guess he was this comedian. But it's so funny that comedians write jokes for other comedians. You'd think if you're a successful comedian, you could write your own jokes.
I didn't know that was a practice until that Judd Apatow movie, Funny People, came out, where it was Seth Rogen writing jokes for Adam Sandler's character.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was what the plot was.
Yeah.
Apparently that's common practice. You can make a lot of money doing that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like ghostwriting, but for other comedians.
Yes.
But yeah, so my first time on stage was my dad, he'd do a lot of first night performances, so that's New Year's Eve essentially. Lots of towns host their own everyone comes.
I love to educate the listeners on here, so I of course know what first night is, but for people who aren't indoctrinated, what is first night?
Yeah, it's literally New Year's Eve celebrations in any town or city.
Okay.
Most towns and cities have them of oh, we're gonna invite musicians and comedians and spoken word people, any kind of performance thing. It's open to the public. I've been to a ton of them because my dad would perform at a bunch every year.
Sure.
But I know Boston has their own first night celebrations, and they do a ton of stuff.
I gotta key my brain in here. When you mentioned Boston, it's not the band, it's the town of Boston.
The town of Boston.
Because you're Boston
yes.
has. I was oh wow.
Oh my god, that's so funny. I wish the band itself just had all these New Year's Eve celebrations. They're really gung ho about it. No, but yeah, so he would perform at those, and so my first time on stage was during an intermission of one of his performances. I went up. This is when I was maybe 7 or 8, and just did a bunch of knock knock jokes for the crowd.
Really? Really?
But there probably was like 300 people in the audience. Like it was not like a small venue. And
that's a great first gig.
Yeah. It was a good time. I think people really took to me and my very random jokes about ponies and whatever else. But
God, that must have given you some confidence being in that like space and having them support you like that.
For sure,
Was it pretty much like that during your childhood? Just like cozying up to your dad and getting stage time whenever he tossed some scraps to you?
I wish. I think that's like what I tried to make it be, but obviously like he has to do his job and could not invite his small child on stage all the time.
Sure.
But yeah, I started doing like summer camp musical theater things, but my dad for a long time was sort of my like pseudo acting coach.
Sure.
Because like he already knew how to do all of that stuff. And we did have like a small stage in our living room that was built out of like plywood and like,
wow.
Yeah. So he would like practice his routines up there and then I would practice like monologues and
I feel
whatever.
like that's what people pay for in this city. They'll pay to be in an acting coach where it's literally just a plywood stage like a foot off the ground and they're like, oh, thank you. Yeah.
Right. No,
Can't wait till
exactly.
next week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just got it for free in my own home.
Yeah, and so how, do you feel like because you've kind of gotten that access early that you have a jump on other people who, you know, are still trying to figure out how this works and jargon and what to do?
Definitely. I mean, I think, I'm still trying to figure it out too. I think this industry has so many paths that it is next to impossible to be like, I know exactly how I'm going to be successful. But I definitely think in two ways it was super helpful. I mean, my dad just already knew what you needed to be successful. So like in that respect, he knew I needed a demo reel and a website and like certain monologues and that I should be in a ton of short films. Like he knew all of these things already, which was super helpful because like I know a lot of other people just kind of have to like Google a lot and figure it out and hopefully find some sort of acting mentor elsewhere. And then on the flip side, I think like stand-up is honestly, in my opinion, the hardest thing to do in the industry. It is like the hardest.
Do you still do it?
Ever. I don't. So I have never done stand-up.
Oh, okay.
I am very like.
You just have a lot of respect for those who do.
Yeah, because I've seen like my dad through all of the ups and downs of his career, which I think has honestly been one of the most helpful things of me going into the industry is that I know that even if you have the highest of highs, it could mean the lowest of lows are around the corner. Nothing is guaranteed. And so I don't go into it with this kind of like star-studded view of everything, which I think has allowed me to stay a lot more grounded and like practical than a lot of people being like, oh my God, I'm going to do this one thing and be famous. Because even famous people don't have that. Like, it's like you could have a very successful...
writing a book or an album.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like you could have one very successful movie, but that doesn't mean that you're going to keep succeeding, which is a sad way of looking at things, but at least you know that. And then
at least you know, because like what you're talking about is obvious to like people who have lived here for a while and have been like kind of kept their ear to the ground of the industry and stuff. But a lot of people move here so green and thinking like, I'm going to be the next Renee Zellweger. And was that her name? Yeah, Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be the next Channing
Meryl
Tatum
Streep?
or
Yeah,
Meryl
no,
Streep.
for sure.
Yeah, I'm just going to sail into LA and I'm going to go to an audition and I'm going to blow them away. And yeah, and it can be years of that. And so
for sure.
Since you've had this front row seat to see like the different avenues of the industry, where are you navigating yourself now, do you feel like? I mean, like you said, it's hard to nail down one thing because we all need to be kind of hyphenates, but generally, what do you like prefer?
Yeah, so when I was in high school and we had that film program, I also started writing. And so I had always kind of been doing acting and writing in tandem, but everyone knew me as an actor and not as a writer. But I figured out, I in high school wrote my first feature as a part of I figured out some weird, I took my free period in school and made it like an independent study where I just like wrote a film.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
How long was it? You say feature, like?
Yeah, it was probably like 95 pages. It was like a regular length feature.
What was the genre? Was it horror?
No, so that is why I was super interested in coming on the podcast because I mostly write grounded sci-fi. But I very recently have become kind of a horror fan and I'm trying to navigate into that space. So it's been something I've been trying to like critique and like be involved in more. But yeah, so that feature was very grounded, kind of like post-apocalyptic sci-fi. And so that's pretty much like until pretty recently everything I've written is grounded sci-fi. So when I went to college, I went to Sarah Lawrence, and it's like an ultra liberal arts school where you can do whatever you want, essentially. And so I every semester figured out a way to have an academic class where we have to do all these like final projects. They're called conference projects, and they're like semester long research projects.
Okay.
And so I would take an academic class every semester where the professor would let me write a feature for my project. But
amazing.
It was always in like biology or psychology or anthropology classes. Like it was never in a film class, which I think was really helpful. So yeah, I totally forgot where I was going
to help
that,
free yourself from like being surrounded by other film students and stuff. It's nice to kind of take yourself out of that zone, because like I do a little writing too, but it's mostly like during downtime at work or things like when it's like working out. You do it when you find the time. Otherwise,
right.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So it like gave me these built-in. It not only gave me built-in research for my projects because I was just like using the things I was studying in class to write the screenplay, but also gave me built-in deadlines that I had to meet. And so it forced me to just like kind of bang out all of these scripts very rapidly.
What a great situation.
Yeah, it was great. So I was kind of doing that while I was in like 3 plays a semester and doing all these short films and like whatever. So I was kind of developing both at the same time. So that's part of my hyphenate. I'm an actor-screenwriter.
Gotcha.
And then I think after I graduated, because of this practicality that I had ingrained in me from childhood, when I was at Sarah Lawrence, also started doing internships in production, and then I kind of moved towards film distribution. So I interned at a few smaller indie production companies in New York, and then my senior year, I interned at Magnolia Pictures, so it's more on like the distribution side of things, and I was doing more like marketing. I was like a marketing intern, and then right after I graduated, got a job at IFC Films, and I was in acquisition. So that was like my kind of introduction to horror movies in general. But yeah, so I kind of was like, I made the choice to say, I'm going to take this full-time job for a year, kind of put acting on the back burner for a bit, and develop kind of the business side of my acting portfolio. So that's like when my reel got done and my website and like all of these things. And like, make sure that I had these more business side of film connections so that later on I could do creative things and have both the knowledge base of how to go about it and the connections to make it happen.
That seems like the game to play when you mentioned, it's not spreading yourself thin. It's making sure that you ideally understand every part of what you're doing so that you don't need to grovel to a manager or to an agent or to, I don't know, a mentor or something. It's nice to have all of that knowledge for yourself so that you can make decisions for, I don't know, your screenplay or for your roles or whatever.
Right, for sure. So I think like now with where I'm at in my career, I mean, ideally, like if I lived in a perfect world, I'd be doing all these business side of film things and be acting in a feature and writing my own TV shows. It's like all of these, I mean, those things would be happening at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think for now, I've kind of settled on like, ideally, I'd be a writer, producer for like my own TV show and then cast myself in it, because I feel like that is the happy medium of everything.
That would be a dream come true.
Yeah.
So where can people find some of your work?
Acting wise, my demo reel is on Vimeo if you just search Ali Weinstein.
We'll add that to the episode description.
Yeah. I have a website, although Squarespace did something weird recently and took it down, and so I've been trying to get it back. I think it should be back up by now, but I'll figure it out. Hopefully by the time this airs, it'll be working. But if you go to aliweinstein.com, it has like a little blurb about my scripts, and but yeah, I haven't had anything I've written made in a very long time, like not since high school, partially because I mostly write features, and because they're grounded sci-fi, they're very big budget.
Yeah.
I mean, not huge, but still definitely like $10 million films.
And plus, it would still take a long time for that process. It's not like TV. Film is a much longer process.
Right.
Where, like, you have a good idea. Like, it's not... These Marvel movies, they announce them like 6 years in advance for a reason, but even so, somebody could be sitting on like a script like Signs for 10, and it'll take another like 5 for it to actually get made.
Oh, yeah.
And then 15 years after you've had this great idea, it finally comes out. Yeah.
No, exactly. Indie features take literally forever. That is something I definitely learned at IFC. It's like we were seeing films at Sundance that like we had been tracking for like 7 years.
Oh my God.
Or something like, it's like things, especially documentaries take forever, but it's like,
well, that's an interesting one because I feel like documentaries kind of have a time limit. For certain documentaries, there's a point where it might not be relevant or interesting anymore.
No, that's definitely true. I think that they just take a long time to gather and develop and then edit because you have 40,000 hours of footage and it's just like
I've always found that fascinating. The idea of editing a documentary together into like 13th on Netflix was amazing, and I just thought about like how they smashed all of this together into this narrative that carries through the whole thing.
Right.
When it was just 13 separate interviews or whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have very little experience in documentary other than like I made a short, like a 20-minute documentary when I was in high school.
What was it about?
It was
homework.
I wish it was about. So I used to do figure skating for a long.
That's right.
Competitive figure skating and
whatever.
It's whatever. And so my junior year of high school, so I skated at the Skating Club of Boston, which is like a very elite skating club. And so every year the Skating Club of Boston does this thing called Ice Chips, which is this huge ice skating show. And they invite Olympians and it's like very fancy. And so my junior year of high school, it was the 100th year of Ice Chips and which was the longest running figure skating show in the world at that. So, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I made a documentary about like the 100th anniversary of Ice Chips. And it was like, I think after that, I was like, I have zero desire to do documentary film ever again. It's so difficult.
But you were in the process, like you filmed and you interviewed and you put those questions together and all of that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I was like a little like host in it. I used it as like a hosting credit on my resume for a long time. And then I took it off.
See, this is how you do it, listeners. You got to do it yourself. Grassroots. I made this podcast. You made that documentary. You can't wait for somebody to scoop up your ideas. You got to go out there and fan the fire right under your own butt. Do it yourself.
True. Yeah. Yes. Just go for it. At
people
age
are always
16.
really impressed. Yeah. When you can say, oh, I was 16 and I made a documentary and I was the host and here it is.
Yeah. It's not a great documentary, but it turned out decently well for like, I was filming. It's like I had like the camera that my high school film department had like still used like mini like cassette tapes to shoot on, like, and there were some that used SD cards, but like this was like at a time where that was like not like you had like camcorders, I guess, but it's not
the
like
Sony
you had
Handycam.
Right, you didn't have like all of the fancy, like you can't get like a handheld Blackmagic or something.
We didn't have 4K video cameras in our pockets back then.
Oh yeah, the quality would have been better if I shot it on the phone I currently have than the camera I used, but no, it turned out pretty well. I had a ton of help, but it was like very like editing, especially like logging everything and then trying to figure out how to piece it together.
You did the editing yourself too?
Yeah. My mom helped a little bit in terms of like logging all the footage because I was like, this is overwhelming. But otherwise, I edited it together myself and, it was quite a process.
So, how does your family, like, I imagine they're pretty supportive since your dad is he's in the industry himself. So, like, I don't know, some of my friends and things have trouble explaining to their parents that this is what they want to do, and their parents would much rather them be, like a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. How do your parents, they seem pretty supportive. Yeah.
Honestly, they are incredibly supportive in every way, shape, and form. I definitely think when I was in like 10th grade when I was finally like, I want to act and like that's what I want to do in life. And I think at that point my mom reacted by being like, but I thought you wanted to be a biologist. Yep. As if that would like sway me back. Because for a long time, I really wanted to be a marine biologist. And
you just forgot. And you just need to be reminded.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had this passion once, Ali, that is a lot more stable. What about that? But no, I think occasionally my mom still makes those jokes. I think for my dad, it was the opposite, where obviously he was very supportive of me following my passions, but also was like terrified for me because he's been through all the difficult things in this industry and like he didn't want me to experience that.
Sure.
So I think they've always come from that perspective of like obviously being like worried about me because they're my parents, but no, they're like intensely supportive of everything that I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's been great.
So grounded sci-fi you mentioned. I've
Yes.
been talking about this with people. I've never heard it referred to as grounded sci-fi, but it makes a lot of sense. I assume, well, I won't assume. What do you mean when you say grounded sci-fi? What are the themes? What are you referring to?
Sure, yeah. So I am referring to like anything that is near future, grounded in a reality we already recognize. You could very easily imagine it happening like tomorrow or 10 years from now, and often is like derived from current socio-political issues that have been magnified.
Okay, so they kind of have like a moralistic angle to them. I'm trying to think of some examples. Like Elysium, is that grounded sci-fi? Where we've got a satellite full of the rich literally feeding off of the poor back on Earth.
Wow, I've not thought of that movie in a while.
I watch a lot of movies.
Yeah. So I think I always describe it as like the stuff I write is very Black Mirror, very Handmaid's Tale, like super, super grounded. And often, I mean, I think most sci-fi doesn't exist if not to comment somehow on what is going on in the world.
Sure. I mean, half of it is science. The other half is fiction, but science is very grounded, very real.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what I love about it. And I think I focus a lot on if we changed one specific thing that people don't think about a lot, how would that then have this ripple effect across everything?
Ooh, what's an example? That sounds fun.
Yeah, so the script that I kind of have been pitching around that I hope to turn into a pilot is like a near future society where the government has created an anti-aging regimen that if you take it consistently, you can extend your lifespan up to 200 years. But the catch is you have to start taking it at the age of 18. So it focuses on two characters who like one of them, it's like a decision you have to make. So it's like one of them decides to quote unquote live forever and the other one doesn't, and how that affects their friendship, their relationships with their significant others, their parents. Like, because it's all of a sudden, if you are 18 and you're like, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to graduate at 22, I'm going to go live in the workforce and whatever. And you're like, oh, now I'm going to live to 250. I'll go to college when I'm 75 and like you travel the world for I don't know, however many years. And so, but like beyond that, I mean, that is like a life path thing to figure out. But beyond that, it's like so all of this is based, I wrote this script in a biology class where I was studying anti-aging. And it's very much so a thing that many scientists are trying to figure out right now. And like from what I can see, having any significant effect on how long we live would have to be the perfect storm of a million things coming together in the right way. But I kind of wanted to make something that both commented on like, okay, if we have half a population living twice as long as we've expected them to, how does that affect the environment? How does that affect religion? How does, all of these things.
And it kind of reflects our reality where quite literally we enjoy longer lifespans than some people born into the squalor of a third world country and things like that. And
for sure. And right. And then it's like we have like 10 times the impact on our planet because of that. That's then affecting them more negatively than it affects us in a lot of ways. So it's like if we magnified that problem, then it would just be chaos. But I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, of course we'd all love to live longer.
Well, an individual would love to, but population problems are like the first thing that come to mind with,
Right, yeah.
So that's where you start, but really it sounds like it's a character piece, or it's about the people's relationships and how all of those things that are happening in the world affect this individual and their relationships with their families and friends. That's awesome.
Yeah, so hence the grounded is like, it's very grounded in reality, in the plot, in the character development. And you never see them actually, like, it's all happening in the moment of the decision versus like seeing them at age like 60 and how they're feeling. And it doesn't move through time. It's just like them in that moment, especially because if we ever created this anti-aging regimen, we'd have to, like, people think of it as, and this is how it's depicted in movies that have explored similar things, is like, oh, you take a pill and you can live forever. And in reality, we would have to work so hard at it.
Yeah.
And like all the things I studied were very much so rooted in like how much exercise you're getting and caloric restriction. So it's like how much you're eating, how much you're not eating. Like all of these, like taking like superfoods, and it would just have to be a combination of all these things that would take a ton of day-to-day effort, which then like brings up like, okay, if that's the case, like the only people who could really genuinely do this are very privileged people who have the time and money to say, I can exercise for 2 hours a day and then eat these very specifically portioned meals of specific foods. It's like, that is not going to be available to everyone. And that's kind of like the path we're heading down right now. Like, this is definitely like a very real thing that many scientists are trying to figure out. And they're getting closer all the time. But yeah.
That's amazing. So grounded sci-fi. I can't think of a more grounded sci-fi, at least from this decade, than the movie that we're talking about today, which is M. Night Shyamalan's Signs from 2002. So what we usually like to do is give a little bit of context for the movie and then do a quick recap, and then we'll talk about, what we thought about it, analysis, themes, and all of that stuff. So do you remember the posters for this and the marketing for Signs, 2002 Signs?
I I remember, yeah.
It was that brown poster with the signs and all of that. But
right.
the point is that it didn't feature Mel Gibson on it. It didn't say his name, and it didn't say like the director, like from the person who brought you The Sixth Sense or the person that brought you Incredibles.
Right.
Unbreakable. M. Night Shyamalan insisted that this movie stand on its own, like regardless of its star appeal or of its of his relation to The Sixth Sense, because he was afraid that it would give people the wrong idea of what the movie is. Like, oh, Mel Gibson's in it. It's going to be some kind of, action drama, or, M. Night Shyamalan, the guy from The Sixth Sense. It's just going to be The Sixth Sense again. I can't wait for that twist, because that's kind of what was happening to him at the time. It's funny, we're on the other side of it. M. Night Shyamalan's had this rise and fall and rise again, now that he's back making Split and Glass, the new one coming out.
Right.
But when he first came out, it was The Sixth Sense with Haley Joel Osment and Bruce Willis, and do you remember seeing that? You've seen it, right?
Yes, yeah, I've seen Sixth Sense.
Took the world by storm and
right.
cemented him as like the twist guy. And,
yeah.
I feel like it kind of pigeonholed him for a couple years because...
How can you... That's difficult to top, because even though I knew what The Sixth Sense was, I think I watched it like later in life. I still watch it and was like, what?
I definitely watched it when I was too young. I remember seeing it and not getting it, and seeing it again later.
Right. I mean, it's, I think, hard to top that twist. It's like the constantly mentioned example of a twist.
It literally
is.
That came out in 1999, and people still are talking about, like, and that's become like a trope kind of like, oh, he was dead the whole time, or
right.
Yeah, like I feel like Parks and Rec references it like several times of like he was dead. He was Bruce Willis the whole time.
And I feel like every comedy ever has said some version of I see dead people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch Psych, but I
have seen a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, there's one episode where they're like eating Indian food and it's really spicy and they're like dying, and Gus is like, who's one of the main characters, turns to Sean and is like, I see dead people, as if that like expresses how spicy it is. Anyway, one of my favorite shows of all time. But
Psych's a great show. Is that still on?
No.
Oh, they have their series finale?
Yeah, although they keep doing like holiday specials and movies. There's like huge
teasing.
Yeah, there's a huge fan base. They're called Psychos. But yeah, so they keep it coming along, but it ended 6 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sure something will come back, and they'll want to reboot it in a couple of years when we're in our 40s.
Oh my God, I know.
So yeah, he made The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable, both with Bruce Willis. Both had pretty big twists at the end. Then along comes this movie, Signs, which basically doesn't really have a twist.
Yeah, when I rewatched it, I was like, wait, they... Like the latter half of the movie is just them like hiding in the basement while the world is kind of
things happen outside.
Things happen, and then at the end the alien comes back, but it's like so, and then them killing the alien is such a total spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, if you haven't seen the movie, sorry.
Yes, let's ruin this 2002 epic for you. But yeah, it was not as high stakes as I thought it had been.
No, and like we'll get into that, but so I feel like he was pigeonholed because after this movie, it was 2004, The Village. Did you see that one?
I have seen The Village.
I love The Village.
Really?
It's a very divisive movie.
Sure. Yeah, I was not a fan. I think partially because when I saw it, this was like my freshman year of college, and one of my best friends was convinced it was like the greatest movie ever, and I wanted to like watch something else, and then she convinced all of us to watch it, so I was like already annoyed, and then I was like, this is literally the worst movie ever.
I'm trying to think, what else would you... Probably one of the Pirates movies was out at that time, I'm thinking, or something. Maybe, yeah. I saw The Village 4 times in theaters. I loved it.
Damn.
I love Bryce Dallas Howard. I love Adrian Brody. I love Joaquin Phoenix. Everybody in that movie. But yeah, the twist is that it takes place in modern days. I'm going to be spoiling the twist to all of these M. Night Shyamalan movies. So if you haven't seen them, let me know. But yeah, The Village, the twist at the end, people were upset because it's like, oh, it's taking place in modern time. I think that's a good enough twist.
Yeah, I think so. But it was, I feel like a similar, I mean, I'm only vaguely remembering it as a movie, but a similar like slow burn as Signs, where you're like, what? Like, okay, things are happening.
I mean, it's upsetting, I guess, in that the twist kind of doesn't really affect the story. Like, it gives the audience like some context, and you go, oh, but nothing really changes. She still gets back. She still saves Joaquin Phoenix, and it gets wrapped up in a nice little bow. And because she was blind, she can't really convey to anyone else that there's civilization outside, so it doesn't really go anywhere. So that's kind of frustrating. Then there was Lady in the Water, The Happening, The Last Airbender, After Earth, The Visit, and Split and Glass. And so those last ones, from Lady in the Water to After Earth, were pretty universally panned. Every single one of those got terrible reviews, and I saw all of them. But then The Visit, the one where the two grandkids go to visit their grandparents, and then the twist is that they're actually mental patients that escaped institution, killed their grandparents, and are now posing as them.
Oh.
What fun.
Wow. That's a lot.
But people loved it, apparently. But, yeah. Did you see Split?
I didn't. I saw Split. Commercials for it a lot, or like the trailer on TV a lot, but I think, I don't know, I had like weird feel, and this is actually like a strange, maybe not so strange, because of society trope in horror that I've seen pretty frequently, is like using like either people with multiple personality disorder or who are transgender to as like horror characters.
Are you referring to Sleepaway Camp?
No.
The famous, it's a 1980 movie that we haven't done yet, where the twist at the end is that the girl at the summer camp is actually a boy who has been forced to be a girl by their mom, and now they've snapped and are killing everybody.
Oh my God.
And it's like, trans made them crazy.
Right, and which is something, but even in more recent...
Like Split,
or like... there was a movie I saw at IFC, which I don't know if I can disclose, but it was made like last year, and it was still like the two scary characters were someone who was clearly like mentally disabled, and then another person who was trans or non-binary, and like those were like the two horror characters. And I was
I'm really glad you bring that up, because that is so problematic, especially in these kinds of movies where we're painting people in like literally horrific light. You have a responsibility for representation's sake.
Right. No, exactly. And I think it's kind of ridiculous that even now we're using those people that I think a lot of people just don't understand them or what they're going through. He literally
has diagnosable dissociative identity disorder, and the character in the movie who's a doctor, a therapist, is the one pushing him toward, no, you're a superhero. The monks have taught themselves to lower their blood pressure and stuff. And yeah, it's literally doing damage, because there are stupid people out there who take this as fact.
For sure.
And go around and type on Facebook what they've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just kind of ridiculous. Especially, also, yeah, I called it multiple personality disorder, but now it's DID.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, I should have.
Next year.
I studied it in psychology and whatever. But yeah, so especially DID is super rare. It is like not, but it's always portrayed as this thing that is constantly happening to everyone.
Because it's so interesting.
It's interesting, but it's just like obviously people like really twist it to be what they want. Also, I did not mean to conflate transgender people and people with DID. I just think I think people in horror movies conflate them, and it's like not what that, I don't think it's appropriate to do that.
I agree, because then it reflects on society. I mean, movies are the rubric for which we determine what is normal in society, and if we get enough movies telling us that all trans people are serial killers, then that's going to have a detrimental effect.
Right, saying people
I know plenty of trans
DID,
people, and none of them are serial killers.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when they portray people with DID, it like comes off as if they're another character of another gender, like that is what's messing with them, like that's how it is portrayed on screen, which I think is problematic. Like it's just like, I feel like people in there, like the people making these movies, conflate those two ideas when it's just like that is not what that is, and it's just not.
I
okay
sometimes
to
wonder
portray it that way.
I sometimes wonder that, like, some of these movies, I wonder if they're just blinded by money, or if anyone in the room goes, that's actually really bad. That's problematic.
Well, I think so. Horror is like a weird genre where it's very unique and anything goes in a lot of ways, and it is like the most produced genre out of anything,
especially right now. We're in a huge golden age of horror. It's amazing, for
sure. And that is something that I learned when I was at IFC, because IFC has IFC Midnight, and so a lot, and I was in acquisition, so I was watching just a ton of horror movies to see if we should buy them. Really of I can't, like, so many horrendous.
Indie horror can get like really weird too. Yeah, like so mainstream horror is one thing, but indie horror pushes all of those envelopes sometimes.
For sure. And so, but I did not before that. Like, honestly, growing up, I was scared of everything.
Oh, really?
Of literally everything. I hated horror movies. I hated anything with any bit of tension at all.
Never went to Not Scary Farm?
No, I did do Six Flags New England did have like Fright Fest.
Cool.
I would go to things like that, but
That's funny, because I can't handle those things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I like scary movies, but I can't do it in real life.
Yeah, I think I probably was scared of them, but I would go to like the kids version of things. But I was terrified of anything like on TV or in film that was scary.
Right.
And I don't think it was until I was like 16 that I watched an actual horror movie.
What was it? Do you remember?
I watched Insidious, and that was
nice.
Which actually was a really good movie until the end.
Oh,
the end is so weird.
I'm so glad you agree with me on that, because yeah, it's a great movie. It really is, but
it's very scary.
The stuff, the whole thing where they're in what is the stupid name they give for it? Like the really easy to film, really cheap smoke screen stuff everywhere, where Patrick is looking for his son.
Yeah, and then the weird devil playing the piano thing. It just
tiptoe through the tulips. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was too much. I was like, why did you just ruin this perfectly good horror movie with this weird ending?
And now it's spinning off into all these movies.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the other ones, but that was kind of the first horror movie that I genuinely watched and was like, and not like through my fingers and like my eyes closed most of the time.
Awesome.
And then I was like, oh, I think I can like survive this genre. But it wasn't, horror is not something I've like sought out in most of my life, and it wasn't until I was at IFC and it was literally my job to watch horror movies that I was like, oh god, like, okay, like I am like really in this now. But then I ended up kind of gaining a lot of respect for horror that's done well, and now I really love horror because I watched so many awful horror movies that I was like, oh, the people that do this right, it's so effective.
You can't not develop a taste when you're ingesting that much.
Oh yeah, I
content.
probably watched like at least 100 horror movies in a year.
So that's amazing. So like, what, in your opinion, through all of this research, like, is the best kind of horror or the best scares for you personally?
For me, I think
Is it grounded?
It's grounded. I'm more of like a psychological thriller horror movie type person. Like I found, since I watched so much horror in such a short period of time, very little horror actually scares me anymore. But so when I started at IFC, they were like, okay, obviously you should go watch a bunch of IFC Midnight movies so you know what we've acquired before, what we're looking for. And so I watched The Autopsy of Jane Doe and was so scared. I
haven't seen that one.
Oh, really? Oh, it's great. It's like, the idea itself is like pretty out there, but it is, I won't like spoil the twist, but like the main premise is the two main characters, they're a father and son, and they own a funeral home and what is the word for it? It's a morgue, but they are morticians. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So it's like a dark and stormy night, and the son is about to go off with his girlfriend and like go see a movie, and all of a sudden like the police come bring this body to them of this like young woman who was found in the basement of a house, like in a hole in the ground, and everyone in the house is dead, but like there's no sign of forced entry, and they just found this body of this young woman, and they're like, hey, like, can you do this autopsy, because who knows what happened. And then
Because that's really important.
And so
Ooh, that's giving me chills.
oh yeah, it is very effective. And I mean, this was before I'd become like semi-immune to horror movies, because this is like right when I started there, so I hadn't watched a ton of horror. But I was like this is when I was living in New York, and I was like in my apartment, and I was subletting, and someone was like renting out their room to like an Airbnb, and we were the only two people in the apartment, and I was watching this at like 11 p.m. and I did not fall asleep until like 4 in the morning.
Oh my
I
God.
was like, I'm gonna die. Like, and even I think one of the best parts of that movie is that like at the end you're left with the feeling of like, oh my God, this could happen to me, even though it couldn't, but it like leaves you in that place.
I feel like a lot of older horror movies like to do that. Like they'll be, oh, we have hearses waiting outside in case you have a heart attack because you get so scared.
Right. So it kind of hits all that. But I think
they could be sitting behind you. They're waiting in your shower when you get home.
Oh yeah. No, that's definitely you're like, oh my God, this, like, Jane Doe is in my basement right now. That's definitely how it leaves you feeling.
So let's get into the recap.
Yeah, I am.
Mel Gibson stars as Father Graham Hess, who lives on a farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We discover he's a priest only belatedly when someone calls him father. It's not father anymore, he says. Hess lives on the farm with his brother Merrill, played by Joaquin Phoenix. I've never heard of a man named Merrill before, but it's 2018. I'm going to keep an open mind. And his children, Morgan and Beau, played by Rory Culkin and Abigail Breslin, respectively. This was Abigail Breslin's debut, I found out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's so good.
I loved her in Little Miss Sunshine, specifically, but she's great now, yeah. Everything that Farmer Graham Hess assumed about the world has changed when he discovers a message, an intricate pattern of circles and lines carved into his crops. As he investigates the unfolding mystery, what he finds will forever alter the lives of his brother and children. So that's the spoiler-free recap, but
Sure.
Let's break it down. Graham Hess isn't a preacher anymore. He's not a priest. Why? Because his wife died. From who? The director.
Oh my God, I know. When I did not realize that was a cameo until I rewatched it recently, and I was like, oh my God, M. Night, all right.
It's so meta, and it's like, it's just bad, because do you know the scene? So Graham Hess's wife died. I say the director, but it's a cameo. M. Night Shyamalan plays Ray Reddy, a veterinarian who lives in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who one night fell asleep at the wheel and accidentally hit Graham Hess's wife in such a way that she's still alive and like pinned between the tree. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, but the second we move the truck, she'll die.
Yeah. And the way we find this out is this, it's a storytelling technique you see a lot where they'll pepper the important flashback information throughout the movie, and it's like not until the very climax do we see what she said and what actually happened.
Yeah.
Because there's the first flashback where he's just driving, and it's a unique cut in such a way that you're like, oh, is he just going for a drive? But that you see the collar around his neck, it's like, oh, this is a flashback. And the police officer, I forget her name. I have her name somewhere here. Cherry Jones as police officer Carolyn Paskey has to explain to him, like, the car hit your wife. Do you understand? Are you with me? Okay. The car hit your wife in such a way that she's pinned. Are you with me? You still with me here? Like,
yeah, it was so weird. I watched that scene.
It's kind of funny.
Like,
yeah,
it is funny, and she actually is like a very funny character throughout.
Well, her introduction is so weird. How she just appears in his house,
and it's clearly supposed to be this like semi jump scare tactic, and then it's just so. I actually really appreciate her as a character because I think she brings a lot of like weird comedy.
She's like a weird feminist too when she's talking to them about so you saw someone jump on top of your roof, a 10-foot standing leap, and and Joaquin Phoenix is like, this had to be a guy. Like, I know. And she's like, you sure it wasn't a woman? It couldn't have been an Olympian. Could have been an Olympian. There's some woman that's been causing problems around town.
Yeah.
And even like Mel Gibson has to say, I know you're trying to make a point, but I don't know what it is.
Right. There's a lot of moments in this movie that like are like that.
It's funny. Like,
yeah, there are a lot of comedic moments for sure.
of all of the M. Night Shyamalan movies, I feel like this one manages to have really dramatic moments, really scary moments, and funny moments in like evenness.
I feel like it's self-aware of its strangeness. It like there are so many moments in it that like they're clearly trying to create some sort of atmosphere of like weird things are happening.
Yeah.
But it just comes off, I think now, like in rewatching it, as just like weird dead space. Like there's like a lot of moments where like Mel Gibson walks into the house and he's contemplating life, and then he turns and his children are just sitting there staring at him. Like that happens at least 15 times in this movie.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to create this like weird, like everyone's being affected by the aliens, like oddness.
Well,
but
the kids specifically, like I don't know what M. Night Shyamalan told them, because they're great actors, but he told them like, no, take all the emotion out. You are robots. Just be deadpan the whole time.
Yeah, it's like as if I think they're trying to create this atmosphere if everyone is under this like spell of fear, but it just comes off as
I think it's like also a spell of unease because he's not a priest anymore and their mom is dead, and so they feel, like they've been tiptoeing around dad maybe for a while.
Well, that's the weird.
The brother had to move in and he's like up in the attic.
Right. Well, yeah, he has like the guest house above the garage kind of thing.
Which we only see once. Otherwise he's sleeping on the couch or something.
Right. Yeah.
And wait. So I thought it was in the attic, but you're right. It is in a separate building, but
because they like run out in the beginning and like meet on the driveway.
But then why is his special bat, the bat that he loved so much from when he was a minor league kid, in the living room of Graham Hess's house so that he can grab it and swing away when he needs to?
Who knows?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I think, but there's a lot of weird family drama moments, and there's a point like 3/4 of the way through the movie that the young boy, the son, like turns to his uncle and is like, I wish you were my dad. And I was like, where did that come from? I think Mel Gibson's doing a pretty good job.
And how does Joaquin Phoenix react? Do you remember what he says? He says, I don't ever want to hear you say that again.
Right.
Don't you ever say. It's just such an inappropriate response to this vulnerable, confused thing that this child just confided in you.
It makes no sense. Also, I'm like, okay.
Well, they establish. So yeah, Joaquin Phoenix. I wrote down a bunch of things about him because they establish him as such a just despicable character. He is sexist. He's he's super strong and fast. Like I know men and women, and no woman could have done this. He hates nerds when they're talking about like the crop circles and they're trying to explain to the kids like, oh, nerds did this, and nerds don't have girlfriends, so they need to do stuff to get attention, and this is what they do.
Right.
And Abigail Breslin's like, why don't they have girlfriends?
She is the best part of that movie, honestly.
Even like that Wham line of there's a monster outside my room, can I get a glass of water? Like she's so good.
So good.
She's
that was
so
one
good.
of the best parts of the movie.
But yeah, the one moment that really highlights the like just like hills and valleys of drama and comedy is when Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix are sitting on the couch watching TV. The kids are asleep, and Joaquin Phoenix says like, people are gonna think this is the end of the world, and he's like, yeah, do you think that? And then more Mel Gibson goes into this long monologue about how there are two kinds of people. Mm-hmm. There's people who believe in signs, and there's people who just think it's luck. So you just got to ask yourself, what kind of person are you? And it's like this really heavy monologue. Literally, like maybe a beat, Joaquin Phoenix says, I tried to make out with this girl once at a party. I tried to force myself on her, but then I took out a piece of gum, and when I turned back, she vomited all over herself. And if I hadn't taken that gum out, I'd have vomit all over me. Probably would have changed me for life. That's why God exists. And I feel like it's an attempt to show like there are two kinds of people who do believe in signs. Some people who think of them really seriously, and some people think of them like, oh, I almost kissed that girl who threw up.
Right.
But it just comes off as like trite. It's like, what an inappropriate response to what I just said.
I think this whole movie walks a very strange line between trying to make it about religion and not. And like, so I think they keep trying to downplay, like they don't want it to come off as like a religious film, but it is.
The movie thinks it's so freaking clever for like peppering in exposition and stuff about like, oh, they're probably mad because you're not a priest anymore after, well, you know.
Which it's like, yeah, and then it's like the classic, like, I lost my faith in God because I lost someone important to me, and like, why would God do that to me? And but then at the end,
you study the Bible, people die. That's what happens.
Right. And then at the end with the son, so at the end of the movie, an alien does show up, vaguely kidnaps the son, and then squirts weird poison up his nose.
During the news, so throughout the movie, we learn more and more info through like news broadcasts and stuff that's coming in over the radio and TV. And one of them is there have been sightings of them using poison gas. And like one eyewitness reporter is like, oh, they beat up a family, gassed them, and dragged them away. And when I heard that, I was like, gas? Oh no, that's like a technology thing. Like they're actually using some kind of alien tech. No, it's just like it's organic.
Yeah, it's like a spider. It's like Spider-Man.
I thought it was gonna like stab him.
Oh
when
it
came out. It's sharp.
It's weird. So this alien person,
the humanoid alien,
poisons the son supposedly, but the son has asthma,
that's
and
the twist.
So that's the twist, which is ridiculous. And the dad is like, Mel Gibson's like, oh my God, like this is a sign because he had asthma and it protected it.
I believe in God
his
again.
lungs. That's what he said.
No poison got in.
Not what happens.
His lungs were closed. No poison got in.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't touch him.
And that's God saved him and gave him asthma for this moment when we're invaded by aliens and it kidnaps the son and puts weird poison in him.
Oh my God. We skipped a bunch. We skipped right to the end, but so it is an invasion. I mean, well, not an invasion, but aliens do exist. They don't like they spend a lot of time with Mel Gibson trying to act like, well, this is just a hoax. This is who did they keep thinking it was? Lionel Pritchard and the Wolfington Brothers, which sounds like a band.
Right.
The first time they said it, he says it like that. He's like, this sounds like Lionel Richard and the Wolfington Brothers. And I turned to Derek at the time. I was like, oh, turn it up. I love them. But yeah, it's like, it's obvious to us, the viewers, that these are aliens. Cause I think it's, we get a shot of like India and, you know, you see like the map of India and there's like 40 of them all over, which, again, Pennsylvania and India, two places very important to the director of this movie, are like the main places that the aliens put their crop circles. And it isn't until one night when Mel Gibson goes out by himself and he's like looking around and he goes out to a new crop circle and he's yelling at them like, you're not going to be famous. I'm not going to tell anyone about this hoax. Drops his flashlight, picks it up, and this scared the one where he like looks in the cornfield and the leg moves like out back into the.
That is scary.
Still
right?
gets me. That really good.
Oh yeah, I saw that and I was like, ugh. And yeah. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No. I just those are the kinds of scares I love, where it's like we're looking at a long shot of something, and then something that was in the shot the whole time moves, like that kind of like gaslighting. Like, oh my God, that was there.
Yeah,
it happens a couple times. It happens again when they're in the cellar or whatever, and they're looking for air, and Rory Culkin is standing by a vent, and they do one shot of him standing by the vent, and he's just there, and then they cut back, and this hand that was like painted into the grate or whatever moves and grabs him, and it's that's so good. Which brings me to like the physiology of the aliens. They're kind of invisible, which is a cool effect you see sometimes.
That's something I forgot about because honestly, so the moment in this movie that when I was a child and saw it was terrifying, and honestly was probably the reason I was scared of everything for years, was when they're showing they have another moment of news footage.
Is this
and
Brazil?
Like in Brazil, there's a birthday party and they filmed all the kids like looking out the window screaming.
Move, children! Vamonos!
And then there's just this like humanoid, like brownish black alien creature that like walks across the street, and it's like really thin and skeletal and scary, and it is so creepy and scary. And so when I was maybe like 8, it must have been like right after this movie came out on like DVD or VHS or something, and I was like at a friend's house and her older brothers were watching it, and she was like, oh my God, let's go watch Signs with them. And I was like, oh no, I think I'm okay. And so we go downstairs, we're watching it, and Signs is like not really that scary most of the time.
Yeah.
So like I was just sitting there like, okay, I can do this. And then that moment happened with the birthday party, and I freaked out. And then my friend and her brothers just thought it would be funny to torture me, and literally like forced me to stay in the basement and rewatch the like alien walking across the street at the birthday party scene like 7 times. And so I was just scarred for life after that. I didn't watch that movie again until I was like 21. I was like,
probably developed some emotional abusive PTSD because that is
and
insane.
then on top of that, so I developed this fear of aliens and then associated it with corn. I mean, I think a lot of people do. I don't know, because of the crop circle thing.
It's something about them being too tall to see through. That it's like
corn is a very scary plant. But my mom's side of the family is from Iowa, and we would go
corn
visit.
capital of the world.
Yes, and they have a lot of corn fields there, corn and soybean farmers. And so when I would go visit my grandparents, we'd stay in this like basement room, and if you like in the middle of the night, I'd like wake up and I'd be convinced that there were aliens in the corn, and I'd like stand on a chair and like look out, like the windows are like up high because it was a basement, and I would like look out the window, and it would just be like I would be like eye level with like all the creepy like rustling stalks of corn, and it was just I was just convinced that
that's
there were
a great shot.
Creepy aliens from Signs that lived in corn always.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So that's my history with this movie, is like I was terrified of it for years. And now I watch it and I'm like,
yeah.
It's like an M. Night Shyamalan horror movie. Yeah.
So they're invisible, kind of, because when another funny moment when Mel Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix are in their house and they think the Wolfington brothers or whatever are messing with them.
Right.
Joaquin Phoenix is like, you got to act crazy, you got to yell and curse, and Mel Gibson's like, explain curse, because he's still a preacher or still a priest, in heart. He's not going to swear, so he's running around the house. He's like, I'm insane with anger.
Yeah,
which really funny.
But also, if you're trying to scare someone away, is that really what you would do?
I thought they were trying to catch them. Why would they want to just scare them? Because, like, some lights came on, so they would have assumed that it was their car. And if there's, like, 4 of them, 2 guys yelling and screaming isn't going to do anything.
Right.
It was just a bad plan.
It was. It was
but
weird.
It immediately precedes, like, that funniness of Mel Gibson going like, I'm insane with anger, immediately precedes the first. Well, it's I want to say first shot of the alien, but it's their first look at the alien from our perspective. We get a POV shot from the alien's perspective on the roof, looking down at them before it like leaps 15 feet over them to the cornfield.
Yeah.
Which I think is so cool, because as a viewer, I was sitting there and I was like, I was in pain when they're trying to explain it to the police officer, because it's like, if I saw it, I'm sure I could explain. Why couldn't I have seen it? Let me have seen it. But we saw them seeing it, which is, I found it pretty unique.
Yeah, for sure. That's like another thing. I feel like this is partially why horror movies will just be ruined for me forever, but also the reason that I was able to start watching them in high school was that because I started studying film, I was like, I could, if I was scared, just kind of dissect the moment and be like, okay, the camera's right here, and they put lights over here, and this is how they did the fake blood, and not be scared, because I was like, this is just a movie. Whereas before that, I like didn't see it as a movie because I didn't know how it worked.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the movie's job, is to, even if you can do that, kind of separate that and immerse you anyway.
Right, for sure. And so throughout my rewatch of Signs, I just kept thinking about, I'm like, okay, it's 2002, or they made it in 2000.
2001,
maybe.
they were filming it,
is when they were filming it. And so like those shots, it's like drones didn't exist. They probably got a helicopter.
They did get a helicopter. There were 2 helicopter cameramen, yeah.
Right, exactly.
And they look like sloppy too.
Right, and I just started thinking about like the amount of effort all these shots took 16 years ago to make. Anyway, tangent, but it's interesting to see things from that perspective. And I was thinking about like, okay, if we made this movie now, it would, I feel like, I mean, other than having to pay all of these very famous actors, would cost significantly less. Other than, it would just, I feel like it was a very expensive movie.
There's almost no visual effects. The aliens show up for maybe like 20 seconds of screen time, and it's usually practical, like with the hand and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a drama. It's a character piece.
Right.
Which is really fun to watch. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a great movie. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, because I can literally like jump back in time to when I watched this as a kid and remember how bored I was with some of these scenes. Like, oh my God, they're just talking. But, you know, now that I'm older and wiser and more intelligent, I can listen to these things and really appreciate it. Hold on. That's not supposed to happen. We still good? Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
All right. So I wrote down a couple of things in my notes here that I wanted to specifically mention. Let's see. We already talked about the cop in the house and Lionel Pritchard and the Wolfgang brothers. Oh, the dog. So they have two German shepherds, the Hess family, Houdini and
Isabella.
Isabella, that's right.
Yeah.
And so in screenwriting, there's a thing about, you know, the trope of kill the dog, which, you know, like in John Wick, is a way to establish that someone is so evil and so beyond help that they will kill a dog, and that means that they're clear and free to be murdered themselves in some horrible way.
Sure.
This is subverted in this movie because Rory Culkin has to kill Houdini out of self-defense.
Right.
There's like some mentions that because of the aliens here, all animals in town are acting like predators around.
Right.
And we see Abigail Breslin and Rory Culkin trying to give water to Houdini, who's growling. And that scene is really freaky. It's Abigail Breslin, she's like 7 or something, and Rory Culkin, kids, and the dog sounds like it's really growling. Like, and they're right there.
I think Abigail Breslin's maybe like 5.
Was she really?
She's so little.
She
like,
is really little in that.
She must.
I should have looked that up.
Yeah. I feel like she could not, right? And like, I feel like she's not that much younger than me. Maybe we're the same age, and if it was 2002, she would have, or they filmed it in 2001, she was like 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
She does a great job.
So good. She's so good. All the water also, so Abigail Breslin's character has this weird thing about water which ends up also being another twist at the end of the movie, where she just doesn't like to drink tap water and leaves glasses of it everywhere.
Well, it's like it gets old. She'll she'll fill a whole glass, drink half of it, and then leave it somewhere.
Right. And then one of my favorite moments is like Mel Gibson comes in and is like, why can't you drink these? And she's like, hair, dust, amoebas.
My brother drank it and it has amoebas. Morgan drank it and it has his amoebas in it.
Yeah.
It's such a kid thing.
But it's real. I mean, I think I definitely had like 7 glasses of water on my nightstand as a child, and it was the same thing that I was like, well, there's dust in it now, Mom.
Or there's cat hair in it now. I can't drink it.
Yeah. Anyway.
But I thought that was so interesting because they have to kill the dog. He does it out of self-defense, but it's all off screen. You don't hear anything. They didn't scream at all. The dog doesn't like bark or anything.
No.
Like, what kind of child doesn't scream when the dog is like attacking them?
But that's the other weird thing. Another weird line that happens in this movie is that Mel Gibson, or him and the police officer are talking, and then the police officer keeps calling him father because he is a priest, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, don't call me father. And then he's like,
I
can't hear. And she's like, what's wrong? And he was like, I can't hear my kids anymore. And then it was like a weird conflation
double
of
entendre,
like, it's like, I'm not a father anymore because I don't hear my children. I was like, this is a lot.
Oh,
like,
so clever.
A lot with this line.
And so Ray Reddy, the guy who killed his wife, shows up. They decide to go to town to get some pizza. And Joaquin Phoenix goes to an army recruiter for no reason to talk to him, and we find out that Merrill, Joaquin Phoenix, was a minor league baseball star,
right?
And he has got 5 records under his belt and 1 strikeout record. As we see Lionel Pritchard, sans the Wolfington brothers, played by Michael Showalter, a very distracting role for anybody who knows Michael Showalter from The State or Stella fame, but he's got like that leather vest or whatever, and he's got tattoos on his shoulders, and he's filling out a army recruitment thing just to like just so we know who Lionel Pritchard is. Never shows up again. Doesn't really matter. Just so that we know he exists. But then when they go back to eat pizza, Ray Reddy is just walking by, and they all like, they all just seem really uncomfortable. And Abigail's the only one that's like, who is that?
Right, and all of us are like, who is that? And
We don't
nothing's
know.
explained until like probably like 40 minutes later.
Until the second flashback, and we see him, he's sitting on the side of the road, and we're like, oh, that's why.
Right.
Like, otherwise it's like, oh, they're all ex-lovers.
Yeah, it's really, or they're just like, I feel like it just comes off in like a really weird way of like this stranger in this town.
It's supposed to be foreshadowing, but it just comes off as weird.
It's so strange.
Because when they finally capitalize on it, so Ray Reddy got an alien like came into his house, and he was able to fight it off and lock it into his pantry. And after doing so, didn't call 911, but instead
Just
dialed
fled.
7 numbers to call Graham Hess to hang up on him. But he said, and when Graham Hess shows up, Mel Gibson, to talk to him, he's like, I didn't know who else to call. Your number was right there next to the phone because I wanted to say I'm sorry, but I just never did.
Right.
And so he's been sitting in his car all night with all of his stuff packed, ready to waiting here, hoping that Graham will have heard that strange phone call and come here.
Yeah,
Just so he can... So... It's super meta. Ray Reddy is the guy that took his wife away and also took his faith away and basically sent Graham down this entire premise that the movie exists for. Ray Reddy also happens to be the director and the writer and the producer. So in a way, he is God, and he did take his family away, and he did take his faith away and all of this stuff. So I find that, like... I feel like I'm doing way too much of his job, of M. Night Shyamalan's job for him, but I think that's pretty cool to do that. What's not cool is to have that same character also deliver the key foreshadowing way to defeat the aliens. Of coming down from high and saying, hey, main character, they don't like water. Gotta go.
Right.
It's so frustrating that give that to anyone else. Give that to like a news broadcaster or even the cop.
Yeah. Well, but it is kind of this thing that is mentioned throughout. Like earlier on in the movie, they're like, oh, I don't think that they like water because of the news. Like, I feel like there's some sort of thing where they're like, oh, we're going to move to the lake. I also could have just like... I like skim watched it in the recent watch, so I could have fast forwarded too much, seen that part, and then gone backwards and thought it happened before. But I feel like they do keep. They mention the water because of Abigail Breslin's like water thing.
Yeah.
So you know it's going to come up at some point. But I feel like maybe that does happen after, where Joaquin Phoenix is like. But I think there's some line in the beginning where they like mention they're like maybe you should move towards a lake before M. Night Shyamalan's character says anything about it.
I know the scene you're referring to. It's when they do their little vote, right?
Maybe.
That's right after, because he says,
okay.
I'm going to the lake. I think they don't like water. I've trapped one in my pantry. Drives off.
Right.
And then Mel Gibson goes into the house, and he does the knife thing. So, like, this has become a trope. I've seen this shot a bunch of times of a character looking into a knife and the reflection to, like, look under a door or something.
Yeah.
That scare too, where the alien like claws out under him and he has to chop off its fingers.
Right. And that was the scene that like confused me.
It doesn't land right away.
Yeah. I was like, why? Because it's also shot really weird where it's kind of like shaky and blurry, and you're like, what is that? I watched it twice and I was like, is that a human hand?
Yeah.
But it's just that the aliens are like chameleons and they can camouflage to whatever is around them, which is another twist.
It's kind of cool.
It is cool. And it's something I forgot was the case because all I ever thought about science was the scary moment where the alien's walking across and it's not, which in that moment I'm like, why isn't the alien camouflage?
It definitely should be.
Yeah. But anyway.
But that's not as scary.
So I forgot that was a thing, and then I realized the alien's hand in that scene where it comes under the door is camouflaged to look like the brick.
Yeah.
And then that is the same
Which is
alien.
still confusing.
at the end with the fingers.
So it's like every coincidence that you want to throw up to this movie and go like, Jesus, really? It all has to come together? That's the movie. The whole overarching theme and twist of the movie is that God is the master Chekhov's gun, and that everything he has ever done or ever will do will come back in some way, and it'll all make sense.
Right.
From the final last words that his wife said to him about swing away and all of that stuff.
Oh my God, that was too much.
To
I was
the
like,
water
are you
bottles.
kidding me?
It's so, oh my God. Sorry, I want to get to that, but I want to talk about that baby monitor thing that they do throughout the movie. It's really clever.
It is clever.
And it sets up for a lot of, like, there's no big scares, but it does set up a lot of unease when you're watching it.
For sure.
Like the clicking and stuff.
It's the noise that the aliens make.
design.
And then Mel Gibson hears it again when he's in that scene where he's by himself in the cornfields. And I'm like, that is so creepy.
It sounds like almost Predator, like that, like cicadas or whatever.
Yeah.
But they use it a couple of times, and the first time where they are climbing like on top of the car, it feels very like Steven Spielberg-y, where they're like, we got to figure this out. I don't want you climbing on top of the car, honey. And then we all need to be linked together to like ground it and like get a signaler up there. It's really fun. It's such a simple thing. It's like, we are here, we got to get on top of the car, but he makes the scene so like family fun. It's fun to watch.
Right.
Let's see. Yeah, we already mentioned the Brazil footage. I Wish You Were My Dad. So I guess we can just skip right to the end, which is, so Abigail Breslin leaves water all over the house. Meryl, the Joaquin Phoenix, has a baseball record and a baseball bat hanging on the wall. What are some of the others? Rory Culkin has asthma. All of these things are really important, and God gave Abigail Breslin an aversion to hair and water so that they could spill it and knock it on the aliens and kill them.
Right.
God gave Meryl an amazing batting or an amazing swing speed or whatever, but a terrible record so that he would end up at this house to beat up the aliens. He gave Rory Culkin asthma so that he wouldn't get poisoned when that happened. And he killed his wife so that God himself could speak through his wife and give him all the information he needed. And the reason I say that is because it's at the very end when we find out what her final words were. She says, "Tell Graham to see." Tell him to see, even though she's talking to Graham, and it's been established that she's lucid and not experiencing a lot of pain. And the way I interpreted that was, it is God himself telling her to tell Graham, and she's going, it's like when you go, I wanted to say happy birthday and nothing else, and the banner says, I wanted to say happy birthday and nothing else, instead of just happy birthday. It's like a miscommunication of him saying, tell Graham to see, and she goes, tell Graham to see, is how I interpreted it.
But the funny thing is, when you think of this movie in like a broader context of like what's going on within this sci-fi created world, it's like God put in all this effort for him to just save his family, but the aliens aren't gone at the end of the movie. There's just a dead alien in their house, but like they're still destroying the rest of the world, and they could still come back.
Well, they do say that they're leaving like for no reason, and it's kind of like a War of the Worlds kind of thing where they realize that the air is killing them and that there's 71% of acid on this planet. And it's sentient species can spit acid and sweat acid.
But it's like so because you'd think that God would come down and be like, this is how you get the aliens to leave, and instead he's like, here's how you save your son, one random man in Pennsylvania.
This is God. This is the real story. God is God, and he sees that this guy has faith and a happy family, and he's loving life. Let's fix that. I'm gonna get rid of his wife and get rid of his family, wait a few years, send aliens, and then give him his faith back.
Yeah, it's a lot.
No wonder Mel Gibson loved this script. Are you a religious person? I don't want to be offensive.
No, I'm not. I mean,
you don't have to say what you are. It's just,
No. I mean, I actually grew up practicing Buddhism, so I definitely am not religious in terms of like believing in God in any way.
Yeah, this like hard Catholic belief, like
it's
vengeful God.
Definitely. I mean, it's something I am aware. I grew up in a very like Catholic area.
Sure.
There's definitely like
parts of
9
Boston, maybe?
churches in my town of 15,000 people.
9.
Yeah, something like that. There's a lot of churches in my town, but and like everyone went to like, what is that there's like after school
Bible study?
It's like Bible study, but for children. Anyway, but So I'm like aware of the ideas of Catholicism and Christianity, but I don't practice them.
Well, because it's like the title has two meanings. Signs. It's referring to the crop circle signs. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan gave this quote in an interview. One is the crop signs, but it's also about faith and the existence of signs from above. Duh. But thank you, M. Night.
Right.
But yeah, because the signs are obviously the physical crop circles and stuff, which were a thing. I don't remember like what era, if it was the 80s or later, but I remember hearing about crop circles and them revealing that it was a hoax. It was like several people, doing them.
Right. It definitely, I feel like, has always been this kind of like horror thriller trope that's existed of aliens and crop circles. And
it's always done in one of two ways. Either they're real and the aliens are crop circles, or it's a hoax and it's like some kid, or I remember on Invader Zim they did one where it was like, oh, we found crop circles, and it was just a cow rolling around.
Oh yeah.
It's such a you watch Invader Zim?
I did watch it when I was younger.
Freaking love that. Can't wait for it to come back. It's coming back.
Oh my god, another one.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to some of the overarching themes of this movie. One of them being that the scariest thing is that a man could lose connection with God, is that a good man could lose his faith, is kind of like the real fear, the real adult fear beyond the aliens and stuff. But you're right. There are aliens literally all over the world in clusters. Like we see the footage of lights that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. Then they disappear, but they're still there because like a bird hits it or whatever. So we know they're invisible.
Yeah.
But the scariest thing is a man losing his connection with God.
Oh, for sure. This like random man in rural Pennsylvania.
The aliens are really stupid. Sorry, I want to sidetrack a little bit though. If they're capable of interstellar travel and technology that can get them all the way here, but they can't open doorknobs.
Yeah, and they can jump like 15 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And, like, which,
are they strong or light?
I don't know. I guess we have to choose to believe light, because at the end when he's like hitting the alien with his baseball bat,
it's
the
not
alien
flying
is
across the room.
I know, it's just like, cool, I'll just take these hits.
Like it seems dense.
Try. Yeah. They aren't. I feel like the aliens were kind of like just a device to portray the whole God thing, but then weren't ultimately thought through.
No, because it's like if you separate the story, like if it's safe to assume that this entire universe doesn't actually revolve around this family, that there actually are other people in this world doing things, then why are the aliens here? Why did they come? What was their goal?
Right.
Why did they leave?
Why did they leave?
Is that
all
part
of a
of
sudden?
the fear?
There's like one news report at the end that said somewhere in the world they created some sort of like, there was like a battle between humans and the aliens, and that's partially why they left.
That there's a like a throwaway line where they say somewhere they created a primitive way to defeat the aliens. We don't have any more information at this time. Like,
it sounds like people who like live in the Amazon and don't communicate with other societies just all of a sudden like rose
pygmies
up and fought the aliens and then disappeared again. Like,
where's that movie?
Right.
I want to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Of the Ewoks taking down aliens.
Right. It just is so... I don't even...
Yeah, so I don't know what the aliens are doing. I think they abducted some people. There's some like references. The army recruitment guy implies that it's like reconnaissance, that they're just scoping the place out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right. They just like came down to see what's up with Earth, and then honestly, Signs 2 is probably coming down the line.
I don't want to watch Signs 2. Or is it going to be about another person losing his faith?
God, yeah.
So yeah, faith. One of the main themes is that everything, even if it seems bad at the time, is a Chekhov's gun planned by God. And that he lost his faith, and he was always going to get his faith back as a result of aliens coming down. It was all preordained that everything in this world, according to the script and everything, is God works in mysterious ways kind of world.
Right.
And that... I mean, we've already gone over it. It plays into all of those little things. What bothers me is that they all happen at the same freaking time. That they're not spaced out and made like, whoa, maybe there is a connection. It's like, no, obviously there's a connection because all 6 of them are happening like boom, boom, boom.
Right. Which I guess is like kind of his style of the twist. Like at the end, it all happens and it's a huge twist. Because I think especially
it's like
in
6
this movie,
twists made to feel big, like one big one.
Right. So it's like, if this is your movie, movie directly following The Sixth Sense, which is like one of the most impressive twists of all time in movies. I think like maybe he just felt like, I feel like he was really grasping for straws to be like, how do I one up this in this movie that otherwise has been very grounded?
And how impossible. What a difficult thing to task yourself with.
Right.
He's gone on record saying this was the easiest film he's written, produced, and directed. I don't know what he means by that, but he said it's the most popcorny film and the easiest one to make that he's ever done.
It is very, like, they don't really go anywhere.
Exactly. I think it's the very small cast size and the really easy sets. There's like
so
4
contained.
locations.
Right, which is why, like, with the technology we have now, like, they made, that movie was like $70 million to make. And now I feel like anyone could make it for like $200K.
That was a $72 million budget. Do you want to guess how much it made, domestic and international?
I looked it up.
Oh.
It made over $400 million, which would never
That's
happen
bananas.
now. That's crazy. Yeah. Wait, how much did A Quiet Place make if we're comparing these numbers?
That's a good question, because A Quiet Place is kind of a fun legacy movie for this. It's again about a global invasion, but focused on just a family and how they're gonna survive it.
Right. And that actually, I think I was thinking about that today. In my rewatch of Signs, I was thinking of A Quiet Place a lot, and then kind of the use of children in horror movies.
Yes. M. Night Shyamalan specifically loves pairing adults with children.
Yeah, I think it both gives, obviously, like, kids are scared of more things, but it also gives a really, like, grounded reactions to things, because kids don't, like, mess around. They just say what they're thinking, whereas, like, adults are constantly like, that can't be a ghost, and the kids are like, it's a ghost.
Yes, and it gives adults that key into their inner child.
Right, for sure.
So you kind of get both reactions. You get the sensible adult who's like, I don't know about this. So people can identify with either him or the kid who's like, this is real. I got tinfoil on my head.
Right.
Which is another fun thing that they do. It's like, so they can't read our mind.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure it's a conspiracy theory thing. Like, that's usually how you dress up a crackpot person. Like, A Quiet Place, total domestic gross was $188 million.
So Signs made like 3 times as much almost.
That was domestic. So total $340 million. So about $100 million less.
Yeah, which is crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's because it has a lot more to compete with.
Well,
Back
that's
in 2002,
what I think.
You could only go to the movies.
I think if you made a movie like Signs now, it would make like $4. Like, it would not.
And it would depend heavily on where you released it. If it was at full theaters or if it was on Netflix.
For sure. Which is another thing I realized working in acquisitions and like indie film distribution is, I mean, now there's so much competition. And honestly, I kind of wish we still were in a filmmaking time like the early 2000s, because everything gets so lost. And it is, I mean, everyone was talking about A Quiet Place, and it still didn't make as much money as Signs did in 2002.
Yeah.
Like, but right, it's like, right. But there's too much competition. People expect a lot more out of horror movies now. And yet horror has a huge fan base. Like, I went to Comic-Con in New York when I was at IFC, and I was working like the IFC Midnight booth, and we had all of our Blu-rays of all of our horror movies laid out on the table, and I had just started working at IFC, so honestly I'd seen like 3 of them, and all the horror fans would come up and be like, oh my god, like, what movies do you have? Or what do you recommend? And I just kept being like, The Babadook and Autopsy of Jane Doe, because of the ones I had seen.
So good.
It's so good. But they would be like, oh, I actually own all of these Blu-rays already of like every horror movie that we had ever released. Like, horror fans are hardcore, and they don't care whether it's good or bad. It's just like this like love of the fact that it exists. I feel like for some people it's that visceral scare, like that endorphins or the emotions that they really look for, and they almost don't care if the story makes sense or is really grounded. Right. So it's kind of, I feel like horror is kind of in this weird place where nothing is going to shine like it would have previously if it had a like theatrical release like Signs did.
Yeah.
But it is like people just consume it more than ever. It is the easiest genre to get made, in my opinion.
Well, it's a lot cheaper because ideally you don't need big name people because everybody's going to die.
Right.
You don't need to hire like amazing writers since it's just a one-off. There's probably not going to be a big franchise.
Right, exactly.
Like Saw doesn't get made, like Saw came out in I think like 2000 5, and at the time I didn't think it was going to be anything. I just freaking loved the movie and that script. I know we've got 8 movies later and a reboot and all that nonsense, but that doesn't happen. Like, that's a 1%. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, even if it is not so great, people tend to watch it anyway.
Yes, yeah.
Is because of that intense horror fan base.
But if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. They just got to keep cranking them out because there's a waiting fan base with money that will pay for it.
Yeah, no, for sure. We're kind of at like a weird place with movies in general and horror in that sense.
Yeah. So extraterrestrials, a weakness to water, which has kind of become a trope in itself. It kind of follows Unbreakable, which the lead character played by Bruce Willis again, his weakness is water, and Lady in the Water, that being a thing. I think he'd like. It's not about villainizing water. It's just about like the power of it is that he's trying to put forward. I don't know. That's kind of a stretch. I'm getting to the bottom of the barrel of my themes here.
All good. I mean, yeah, definitely the religious aspect is the true theme.
Yeah. Well, cool. It looks like we're almost out of time here. We are getting to the... we already did the analysis. Now we're going to talk about what we thought about the movie. Here on the Gory Days, we like to rate our movies on a scale of 1 to 5 thumbs, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. What did you think of Signs, Allie?
So I tried to think of it in both the context of like if I had, well, I guess I did see it when it came out pretty much, versus now, I think, and I looked at ratings online and it was like pretty highly rated at the time. And so I think at the time I probably would have given it like a 4 thumbs, but I think now it falls into the like 2.5 thumbs range in my opinion.
Final answer?
Yeah, I'd say that's my final answer. I still like enjoyed it, but there's just so many moments that are comical and don't mean to be. I still was scared of the aliens. I think Test of Time. At the end when the alien actually shows up in their house, it's like a little like, but then it like looks at you and it has like a creepy like blank face, but then these like intense eyes, and that is, I think, still scary. But I think because also all of it happens during the day, it's like, I don't know. I don't think it stands the test of time, so that's why my rating has gone lower, but it's still a fun movie. Cool.
And traditionally, we like to assign those thumbs to characters in the movie. So who do you give those thumbs to? Those 2.5?
Oh man. I feel like Abigail Breslin does like 2 of the thumbs.
Awesome.
And then Mel Gibson probably is the other half thumb. He does a pretty good job.
He does a good job, but I feel like we should have said this earlier. Mel Gibson is a terrible person. Mel Gibson is an anti-Semite. Mel Gibson is a bigot. He should not be allowed to be in Daddy's Home 2 or any other future movies. We are not so creatively bankrupt that we have to resort to bigots and anti-Semites for our entertainment. There are plenty of people who are more talented and more reasonable that deserve those roles. Mel Gibson's a bad person. This was a great movie. At the time, he had just started his descent into his despicableness. It was 2 years after this that Passion of the Christ came out and cemented his evil. Sure. So, I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I feel like I should have said that much earlier. Mel Gibson's a bad person. This was a good movie, separating the two. 2002, very different world. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually did not know that about Mel Gibson. I feel like I just have not really paid attention to him in life, but I concur if that is the case.
Yes, he's gone on record. He was arrested and to the police officer, accused her of being Jewish and mocked her for it and said that all Jews are bad and all kinds of stuff. It's all on tape. You can watch the YouTube video.
Oh my God.
He also berated his daughter on camera while he was drunk. Yeah,
okay,
all kinds of fun stuff.
I take that back. Mel Gibson gets no thumbs. Also, he did an okay job, but like it wasn't really until the end when his son almost dies that I was like, you're showing a real emotion here. Otherwise, he's pretty. But Abigail Breslin is so good in this movie. It very much so reminded me of like a Drew Barrymore E.T. moment.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, and that yes, this movie has a bunch of like E.T. homages, kind of like when Meryl throws his baseball into the corn. You kind of expect it to come back.
That's
just like
what I
E.T.
thought. Yeah.
Yep.
That I was literally waiting for that moment when I saw, and I don't even think I connected it to E.T. I thought I was like, oh, this happens in Signs.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That someone throws something into somewhere, gives up on it, but then it comes out.
Right.
Yeah. But it's just like, it is a fun little homage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. 2.5 thumbs.
What about you? What are your thoughts?
Oh, so Signs, 2002. I really like M. Night Shyamalan, even though he's done some bad Avatar movies and all of that stuff. I do respect him as a writer-director. I always have respect for somebody who is able to make a movie like off of something that they wrote, rather than I feel like a lot is to gain from the relationship between a writer and a director, but when they're the same person, there's so much. You're seeing their vision of their story, which is hard to get to when it's a director telling J.K. Rowling's story.
Right.
I think she wrote Fantastic Beasts, right? The newest one. That's why it's so bad. Yeah, so Test of Time. I am not scared by the Brazil shot, and I hate to say it. That it's just
Fair.
I'm too old, and that shot is so famous, and I've seen it in GIFs so many times, and it's just. That said, some of the other scares really do get me. The leg leaving the corn, the hand going on Rory Culkin. I love the design of the aliens. I hate that they're humanoid, but what are you gonna do? Their skin. It's like I don't know if that's a thing in like nature, but they reflect what's on the other side of them. There's one shot where Abigail Breslin screams and you see her screaming in the skin of the alien.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. So things like that, I still appreciate. And story-wise, it is tight. It's a very small cast, and it's very dramatic with these characters that even when they like don't have a ton of stuff to do, they have a lot of emotion to go through and a lot of growing together. The kids, I like Abigail Breslin, and I wish she was given more to do emotionally and character-wise. Otherwise, she's kind of just there to say silly things and to put the glasses around the house. But they're great. I love watching all of them. So, and Meryl and Joaquin Phoenix is a terrible person, a great character for that. And I'm thinking, as I was watching it, I was like, wow, I never thought about writing a character that I hate, that is like so antithetical to the other characters that they feel that much more real because they're so gross. So I respect all of that. So with all of that said, the theme of religion falls flat on me. I respect it, but as a storytelling tactic for the sake of 6 tiny twists mounting up to a good one, it does not make the movie better in my opinion. So I'm going to give it 3 thumbs.
That's fair.
Yeah. And I'm going to give one of those thumbs to Isabella, the dog. She gets a little dew claw. I'd give one to Houdini, but he was a bad boy. I'll give a second thumb to the army recruitment guy, who was like so impressed with Joaquin Phoenix Major League Baseball records until he hears the one record of his strikeout, and then he's like practically disgusted with him. And the last one I'll give to Lionel Pritchard, that he can share with the Wolfington brothers as they go on tour this summer. And that's the movie. That's Signs from 2002. So before we say goodbye, is there? Do you want to mention one more time where we can find you online?
For sure. You can find me on my website, aliweinstein.com. Ali is how I spell Ali. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Ali Black Bear, all one word, like the animal. So it's ALI Black Bear. That's where I'm at.
Very cool. So I promised myself I wouldn't get into it, but here we go. Weinstein. Do you get that a lot?
All the time. All the time.
That's a shame.
It's less now than it was like last winter.
Yeah.
It was really bad then.
But before that, was it good?
It was, people wouldn't mention it too often, but before anything happened and came out about Harvey Weinstein, they would occasionally at parties, like if I was at like an industry thing or networking, they'd be like, oh, haha, are you related to the Weinsteins?
And you're not, right?
No, I'm not. Weinstein is like, someone said this to me the other day, they're like, the Weinstein to like Judaism is like Smith to like Christianity. Like they're like every Jewish person on earth has the last name Weinstein. So that's an exaggeration, but it's a very common Jewish last name. And so people used to mean it as a good thing, and I would always be like, haha, sure. And then obviously like things went very badly, and then now it's not. I mean, so people I didn't even know were like messaging me on like Instagram and Facebook asking about it. I would get called. This is when I was still at IFC. So I think I mean, people obviously knew I wasn't related. Like, they just think it's this weird, like,
People hope.
funny, curious thing. But people who were calling for my boss, who had never even talked to me and had just, like, emailed me and seen my name, would ask me if I was related. Like, and I was like, are you kidding me? You're, like, calling for the executive of acquisitions at IFC Films, and
to
you're
get a
asking,
scoop?
right? To like, and you're like, it just was very unprofessional. So it's been happening a lot, but
that
better now. It does suck. It's not a fun thing, but it's better now than it was. I think a lot of people were like, oh, haha, I'll ask, because she also works at a very prominent indie film company. But it really, and I'm like, and I always think, I'm like, okay, if you ask and I was like, oh yeah, I am related, what would you say?
Yeah, what's next? Exactly.
Like, have you prepped for that? I've thought about doing that occasionally.
Just say yeah.
But I also just am
He's
like,
my
so, oh, God, and people say that all the time as the thing I should say, which is funny. But yeah, but then I'm like, I don't even want to like tempt fate with that, because I think he's a despicable, horrendous person. But it has been like a very frustrating thing in this industry, and I've thought down the line of adopting a stage name, but I figure if I get like a manager, or like when I get a manager or an agent for acting, and they feel it's necessary, I've come up with a few stage names, but I don't know. I also kind of just like own it. Like, it's my name, not their name.
Eventually, exactly. People will forget, and you'll be the next Weinstein. Well, hopefully not the next Weinstein.
Well, yeah. In terms of having
the good part,
good fame.
Yes.
Yes.
Not abusing your power. Well, I'm glad we got the right Weinstein in here. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
The Gory Days.